Why, hello there, lovely listeners. You have once again journeyed down the red rabbit hole. You found us, you went down that hole. That sounds really bad. You keep toying with the idea that this is a euphemism, but I don't know. That sounded really bad. But you're
That
down
sounded like
here.
euphemism.
It is.
Definitely.
It is. But you're down the red rabbit hole, and that's the most important thing. You've come to find us, and don't panic. We're actually not alone this time. We have the lovely author Lauren North with us.
Hello. Thank you for having me in your rabbit hole, which again sounds very
It
weird.
does sound it's a sentence that I bet you wish you'd never said or
Yes.
never even thought you'd say. Who knows? And of course, Lisa, you are here again.
I'm here cackling away in the background. I never left. I love it down here. Don't talk badly of the rabbit
Oh,
hole.
we won't. We won't besmirch the rabbit hole. So, Lauren, you have 9 books, I believe, and you write psychological suspense and thriller novels. And you're going to be talking to us today about your book, She Says She's My Daughter. Lauren, tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us a little bit about the book.
Okay, thanks, Nikki. So hello everyone. I am Lauren North. I write as Lauren North and I write as LC North, with either psychological thrillers or book club thrillers. And She Says She's My Daughter is one of the books that came out last year for me. I actually wrote it in 2018, but it's taken quite a long time to find a home. So if you are listening to this and you're thinking this book's never going to sell, don't worry, there may be another chance in the future. So She Says She's My Daughter is about a child abduction. So 14 years ago, on holiday on the Suffolk coast, 4-year-old Abigail is snatched from her holiday cottage of the Wick family home. And then in present day, a teenage girl walks into a police station in London and she says, "My name is Abigail Rose Wick. My parents are Sarah and Michael Wick, and I've been missing for 14 years. And it's the story of what happens. The family embrace her as they wait for the DNA test results. Everyone except the mother, Sarah, who isn't convinced it's her daughter. So why is Sarah so certain it isn't Abigail? And who is the mysterious person helping this teenage girl? So, and what really happened 14 years ago? So that is She Says She's My Daughter.
Ooh, and that's available in ebook, paperback, and
Audio,
audio, I believe.
yes, it is. Yes, it's in all those formats.
Excellent. Available on BorrowBox, I think, as
It
well, isn't it?
is, yeah, which I absolutely love. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that app. So many people don't know about it, and I don't know why, because it's just an amazing app. It's from the libraries.
Well, I just spent an absolute fortune on Audible as well. But yeah, then my credits very quickly run out. So it's always great to have BorrowBox.
So, what was the kind of research rabbit holes that you jumped down when you were writing She Says She's My Daughter?
Well, quite a few. It was a really dark story for me to write, and it was actually the first thriller and psychological thriller I ever wrote, because I used to write romance, and then I sort of moved into women's fiction, and then this idea sort of came about for She Says She's My Daughter, and it was the first dark book that I'd ever written. So I really went to town with thinking about those characters and the concept of a child abduction. And the case that it's very loosely based on is the very tragic Madeline McCann abduction. And there was something about that, I think, that really settled in my mind, because it was probably one of the biggest missing persons cases of my lifetime at an age when I was absorbing a lot of things. So I think it's always sat in the back unconsciously in my mind. And it was a huge media campaign, wasn't it? So there was just so much going on. And it was also about a couple, and that's one of the things I really wanted to capture was my couple, Sarah and Michael. You know, they're this well-educated, they're affluent people. Basically, it's the kind of thing you don't think bad things are going to happen to this particular type of people. And yeah, so I think I fell down that rabbit hole a lot, and it was really hard. It's such a tragic story, so I really wanted to capture that emotion as well.
It's very tragic and not solved, which I know bugs Lisa. She likes a solved crime, don't you, Lisa?
Yes, yes.
Not solved yet.
But very soon, potentially.
Yeah, you hope so, because I think one of the things that must be incredibly hard is just the anguish of not knowing. I went to Crime Con in London last year, and it is such an amazing community event. But the speaker who opened it said, do bear in mind that, there is at the heart of every case, there is a victim and there are family members desperate to know what happened to their loved ones. And these cases span, 20, 50 years back in history, and there's still so many unknowns. And it is very, very tragic, the sort of the true crime community and what it's based around.
Well, it's ongoing as well, isn't it? Because when I was as being pod Lisa and doing a bit of research, there were actually a couple of very recent kind of things come up that hadn't occurred to me around missing children. One is the 150 children who were hoteled, refugee children who were housed in the hotel in Brighton, that many of them have gone
Oh
missing.
God, yeah.
We don't know
What?
where they are. Yeah, very recently. They were refugee children. They were housed in a hotel, and yes, they don't. They've found most of them, but there's still several who they've not located. I'm thinking very, very vulnerable children going missing. But also, I even found an article that was about children who were kind of still missing from education following the pandemic and shutting down schools. That those that have never kind of been re-enrolled, and what, not knowing perhaps entirely what's happened to them or where they are or what kind of education they're now engaged in.
Yeah, I
So
mean, the pandemic's another rabbit hole altogether, isn't it? With this lasting like impact that's had on education and children.
I mean, what sort of ages were these Brighton children? Were they teenagers or were they all
I think
ages?
it was quite a range of ages. I don't think it was all unaccompanied. But then actually refugees, some unaccompanied children are very young. So, I mean, I imagine if they were unaccompanied, they would have been fostered or housed in some other way. But yeah, they housed a lot of children in this hotel and it wasn't safe. And we know what the, county lines criminals are. They are seeking out these vulnerable children. That's absolutely, they rub their hands with glee when they hear of children who face vulnerability, because they're exactly the kind of targets that they will look for. So, yeah, it's incredibly sad. There is of course, in your book, Lauren, and in the Madeline McCann case, there have been various people who have come forward and claimed at times to be Madeline McCann,
Yeah.
or who have thought they were. We've had a couple who have been claimed. So Harriet Brooks and somebody called Maddie on TikTok, both used social media to put out a claim that they might be Madeline McCann, but then they both admitted afterwards that it was a joke.
Oh, I mean, it's such in bad taste, isn't it? Yeah, and I think I wanted to capture that a little bit in the story, this concept that people are just going to say what they want to say, and also just members of the public who think they're being useful, who think they've seen someone and call in, and it can just get all your hopes up. And the Sarah, the mother, at one point quite early on in the story, sort of says to her husband, "Look, in order for me to give my other children," because that's the other thing about the McCanns that really stuck with me, was that they had other children, and so I had that in the Wick family, because you have had this huge tragedy and all you want to do is obsess over it, but you also have a commitment to provide your children with an upbringing. So how do those things balance? And so she says to her husband, "Look, I know you are going to carry on hiring your private investigators and you're going to carry on searching, and I understand that, but I can't. I have to find a way to move on so that I can provide my other children." She had 6-year-old Daniel and 1-year-old Rebecca, with a life that feels as normal as possible in these circumstances. And it just, you can't imagine how you get up every day and carry on.
Particularly with a 1-year-old, because they're still in that incredibly formative phase of development where they're taking on everything. The brain's making great leaps of growth.
Yeah, exactly.
Available for them, that attachment is incredibly
Yeah, and
important.
when in the story, when Abigail Wick returns, obviously Rebecca's a teenager, a young teenager, and it's about and that's part of the story. It's about she has known about this, obviously, about what happened to her sister, and it's been almost like this dark cloud over their family, and it's really impacted her life because she's not ever gone to sleepovers. She's had to be very careful about where she's going. She's had no freedom because they've obviously been very scared and trying to protect her, and it has completely affected her upbringing.
I know you have a background in psychology, Lauren. Did you jump down any kind of psychological rabbit holes regarding the upbringing of the other child? within the book, you know, because it would be a very odd circumstance to have that child in, because they're always going to be aware that they are missing a sibling and that there is something wrong with mum and dad, you know, in terms of they're never going to forget, you know, they're always going to be looking for that answer.
I certainly spent a lot of time thinking about the dynamic of the family, and Daniel being a little bit older than Abigail when she went missing, and Rebecca being like completely oblivious as a baby, and how that both would have affected them differently. I didn't spend any time actually doing any rabbit hole research other than me just spending time with some post-it notes, which is my favorite thing to do, and just really trying to imagine a situation and how they would have felt and how they would have reacted. And I think it is part of the job of an author, is to really put ourselves in our characters' shoes and spend as much time as we can there to make it as authentic as possible.
Post-it notes really are the breadcrumbs of the rabbit hole, though, aren't they? You follow, and then you follow the next one, and then you follow the next one, and then before you know it, you're falling deep
Yes.
down.
You're covered in them like some kind of weird luminous monster.
Yeah. There were two other girls who they genuinely thought they were Madeline McCann. So Julia Fostona was quite famous. Well, I saw her on the social medias. She had a page, I am Madeline McCann, on Instagram. And then another girl called Embla Jacko Janani. I can't say her name. I'm going to admit that straight away. And I can't quite read my handwriting. But actually, with both of these girls, so one was in Rome and in Poland, they both there was a follow-up that there was something that perhaps had give them a sense that they didn't belong, that they were seeking for something. So I think in Julia's case, her family suggested she'd experienced some difficulties with her mental health in the past, and that Embla's father said she had that she was on the autistic spectrum, and that perhaps that might have influenced some of her behavior in these cases. But I think in both of their cases, they absolutely 100% believe it.
Yeah, they weren't in it. Yeah, as a joke. Yeah. And that's really sad as well, because they, again, are vulnerable people. And, you know, we all have been teenagers, and we all know, we all have a sense. Part of being a teen is breaking free from your parents and feeling like you don't belong. So you can understand how that can be taken to an extreme level, especially now that teenagers have access to, like, the world is at their fingertips, which is an entire rabbit hole and scary thought that I try not to think about too much.
Well, I also think their world is also at the fingertips of everyone else,
yeah.
because you can put stuff out there and God, if people knew the things I got up to as a teen, I don't want a permanent record of that on the internet, and I'm very pleased that there doesn't have to be one.
I said to my son last week, because we always get the emails from school saying, please remind your children to be really careful. And I just said, if you don't want to put that photo, if you take a photo and you don't want to put it on family WhatsApp, then it should never be sent to anyone. It should just be deleted. So that's like our rule of thumb. If you're not going to send it to me, don't send it to anyone else.
That's a good rule. And also, there must be things that he thinks, oh gosh, I don't want to say that on the family WhatsApp. It could be like a picture of a cool car he's seen. It's like, I really want to share that with my mates, but I don't want to show my mum.
It is such a difficult situation for the youth of today, which makes me sound really old when I say that. But we, as you said, Lisa, we all made terrible decisions and we made terrible mistakes, but there was no record of it. So we can still wake up at 4 a.m. and cringe over all the awful things we did and how stupid we were, but there's no photograph or video or written message that says that we did it. And that's what's really hard for them, I think.
No one's going to be kind of looking it up when we apply for a job.
No,
I know. Lots of places where you apply for the job, and they definitely will be.
But you ladies, you speak for yourselves. I was an angel growing up.
I don't believe it.
Absolute angel.
Yeah, an angel. You were at home, kind of writing and reading really dark books.
Stephen King. Yeah,
I was like the Unabomber.
You were marking out the beginnings of the rabbit hole and digging away.
But from an abduction perspective, it has completely changed things now as well, because the first thing the police are going to ask is who's got video, who's got photos, and they're all online, and it is another world that's at the fingertips of these sort of true crime investigators as well. What's available now that wasn't available even 10, 15 years ago.
Well, the internet has become a bit of a lure as well, because, before that, someone would have to, I guess, either stumble luckily upon a child that was on its own that they could steal, or would have to stalk one to find when the best time to strike. Whereas with the internet, they can groom them online and then tell them where to meet them. It's like ordering. They can just order up a child.
A very, very scary situation for everyone right now, isn't it? I mean, it's just hard to see how it's going to get better and not just worse and worse and worse.
I was going to say Uber kidnapping then, but I don't think we can get away with that.
Oh, goodness. Dark in your room writing dark books. But we had the runaway childhoods because we were probably drunk in a field somewhere, having a lay down, and nobody was taking pictures of us. Thank goodness for that. So she says she's my daughter, Lauren. Your mum Sarah is really skeptical, and I really enjoy the way that you write from both the point of view of the mum and from Abigail. And it reminded me of that program. I don't know if anyone's seen The Imposter on Netflix. And you've got the Frederic Pierre Bourdin, who is an imposter, literally an imposter, and he pretends to be missing child Nicholas Barclay, who I think went missing when he was about 14, but or was he much younger than that? But he pretends, he poses as this child, and he doesn't look anything like him at all. So Nicholas had blonde hair and blue eyes, and Frederick has dark hair and brown eyes, but the family just entirely embrace him. And I just when I was reading your book, it really made me think of that case, and I just wondered, how did you get into the mind of those characters to write from that point of view?
Well, I can really feel sorry for the family in that case, and it's something that I try to really capture in She Says She's My Daughter, with the husband Michael and the children Rebecca and Daniel, who are both teenagers, just wanting to believe it so badly, and it just accepting this girl who they've never met before in their lives immediately into their homes, into their lives, because you would want to believe it, wouldn't you? You'd want to believe that there is a happy ending to this tragedy, and it was really,
What you've been waiting for.
yeah,
Isn't
exactly.
it?
And that is the awful thing about these terrible cases, is that there's just so many unknowns, and so I really wanted to have that conflict between the husband, the father, who was just all in believing, and then the mother, who at one point she points her finger and goes, I don't know who you are or what you're doing here, but you're not Abigail, you're not my daughter, and just having this sort of real conflict, because then you've got this poor teenager who's so vulnerable, who's just sort of said, it is me. And like you say, with the other cases of the girls who truly believe it, like, if you've been told this thing and you believe it to be the case, you're not trying to hurt anybody. And so it's a case of who do we believe in this situation, which is, again, with most psychological thrillers, it's whose side you want and who do you believe. And I really wanted to sort of have both sides of that come across in this one story.
But you'd never know, though, would you? I mean, a child that goes missing at 4, they're a completely different person 2 years later, let alone, 10 plus years later.
Their eyes don't tend to change colour.
Well, no, I'm that Bourdain guy was really pushing his luck there.
Yeah. Well, he said, didn't he? He said they did it to him. That he'd been.
Had his eyes died?
They changed. He told them they changed the colour of his
They
eyes.
dripped chocolate into my eyes for 10 years, and that's what changed the colour. But you wouldn't. I mean, if the basics are the same, you still wouldn't. That there's people that I can go a couple of years without speaking to, and I know it's them, but it's still kind of like, is it? Sometimes you just think they've changed a lot. People can change generally within a couple of months, and you can still see the difference. But a child, that's developed over that time, especially in probably harsh circumstances. Let's be honest, that in a lot of these kidnapping cases, they're not good circumstances that these poor children are being pushed into. So you just don't know what's going to have happened to her in that time.
And that's one of the things that Sarah really agonizes over, the character in the book, about Abigail and whether it is her daughter, because she does, even though she adamantly believes it isn't, there is a voice in her head saying, well, is it? Am I just trying to protect myself by saying it isn't? And she does look at the things that are different between the daughter she remembers from 14 years ago and this young woman standing in front of her. And she is thinking, well, how much is nature and how much is nurture? She says she's grown up in a very different she said she grew up in Colombia, so a very different diet, a very different lifestyle. What impact would that have on her growing up? And yeah, it is a question you're going to ask, isn't it? Or you should ask.
And you don't know if it's going to re-trauma them by asking too many questions, or it's such a difficult position. I mean, if one of those girls that claimed to be Madeline McCann actually was Madeline McCann, how would that even play out? I suppose this is the crux of She Says She's My Daughter. It's how that kind of psychology plays out within the characters, and she's not going to remember. I mean, if from 4 years old, you're not going to remember your parents either.
No, and I think especially with a traumatic event, you're like, and then a whole new world, you are probably not going to remember, and you're going to start thinking it was just dreams, aren't you? I think at that young age, which is why it was such a critical age to choose in my novel, really.
There's also the disassociation as well. You've probably learned to disassociate from it to protect yourself, because you can't run, you can't fight. So the only thing you can do is just shut down to protect yourself. So yeah, it would have felt like there wouldn't be any memories to recall.
We've taught Lisa about this, haven't we? About the statistics regarding like abductions. Can you remind me again what those were? Have you got them to hand?
No.
Oh, come on.
No. I've got another case. Hang on, I'm looking.
You had all the stuff to hand on the last time we spoke about this, and
I
you
don't
said
have the same notepad.
because you said that the numbers had something like doubled every year.
Yeah, and it's so scary, but also like, has it really doubled numbers, or is it that the more cases are being reported? Are there places in the world where cases wouldn't have been reported at different points in time?
It could be, and I think that the majority of abductions, and kind of correct me if I'm wrong, but are family orientated anyway. It's someone that knows that child. It's the wayward mum or the wayward dad, or the someone who wants that child that knows them, that will take them.
Yeah, it's not strangers. Yeah.
The stranger danger isn't as much as we think it is. However, I still would be a bit kind of reluctant to not think about that around, like I wouldn't leave a child alone in a park or something, just in case. You'd still keep an eye, wouldn't you, just to make sure that they were where you left
So
them.
when we were growing up, the two big dangers were stranger danger and quicksand.
I remember being terrified.
Yeah,
hang on,
quicksand.
Where
it's
did
really
you
not
grow
been
up?
as much of a problem in my life as I
No,
thought
it
was
certainly
gonna
wasn't.
be.
Did you grow up in Dune or something, or Star Wars?
No, and that's the thing. Like, I've never come
Between.
across quicksand, but we were sort of informed through film and books that quicksand was a thing we all needed to be aware of and be quite scared of, I think, growing up.
I have never been afraid of quicksand.
I did. Oh God,
because you were at home. You didn't go out. No, quicksand a thing. Because I remember being afraid of quicksand, and that definitely not being like having been a grown up and looking at it and going, hang on, I definitely have not encountered as much as I thought I was going to.
So you guys never played in the sandbox?
Yeah, we did, absolutely. But we were always on,
But what
on,
if it
on the
sucked
lookout
you
for
in?
quicksand.
There's got to be there was something we watched.
Never-ending story that was like formative years book, and then I can't even remember where else, but it was a big danger or a fear of danger, and then the whole stranger danger. But we were never told, or I don't remember ever being told, it's not just strangers. Look out for your neighbour or your fun uncle. Whereas I think I'm much more aware of that with my kids, and being like, if anyone ever tells you not to tell anyone anything, tell me immediately. Like, it's a horrible thing to feel like you need to be aware of, I think.
Yeah, my mum used to tell us about, she used to say there was a man in the bush in the park. And that was the creepiest thing that she'd ever, I mean, she said a lot of weird stuff. I mean, she used to tell us that there were snakes in the cinema, so that's why I couldn't get off her lap to go somewhere. so I have to stay still. I know. Lisa knows this about me.
There's kind of giving your children some understanding to keep them safe, you know, developing their sense of criticality to then go, oh, hang on, that's not right. But then there's also just terrifying them to keep them in line.
And that's what she's, because there was these kind of swing park, we called them swing parks, that were between the squares that we used to living. And I'd walk through to, my mate lived in the other square, so I'd have to walk through a swing park, and she said to me, there's a man living in the bush in the swing park, so get through there as quick as
Oh
you
my
can.
God.
So I used to get into the swing park, and then I'd be like staring at the
And
bush
running.
for like 20 minutes. No, I'd be like, where's this man?
Oh.
But all she did was pique my interest rather than scare me.
There are a few people living in tents in the park, though.
Well, there is
At
now. Housing
times,
crisis.
yeah, no, definitely no. I have found a page of statistics if you'd like
Have
to
you?
hear it now. I thought I forgot about that. So in the United Kingdom, an estimated 112,853 children are reported missing each year. But I think what you need to interrogate a little bit with statistics like that is the amount of those that are actually snatched by a stranger is
Yeah.
incredibly small. What happened to Madeline McCann was incredibly rare. That was very unlikely to happen. There's a lot where it might be the other parent. So if parents have separated, sometimes it might be a reported missing, but it was actually the other parent who has taken the child. And in most cases, though will be reported as a missing child, they will return.
Well, there was the case last week, wasn't there, of the two children who went with a 14-year-old to a theme park and were seen walking away and then weren't seen for 24 hours. And that was all over the news. And we were all thinking, oh God, what's happened? And then it's all been fine, all cleared up. So they don't report what actually happened. Yeah, no, that would have obviously gone down as 2 missing persons cases, or 3 even, with the teenage girl. And they, luckily turned out okay.
Yeah, it's a bit scary out there. And Lauren, you said to us that the new book that you've written, a very scary moment happened to you that kind of inspired part of that book, didn't it?
Yeah, so I have a book coming out in a couple of weeks on the 18th of July called I'm Her Mother, and it is born from a situation at a roadside services that happened last year.
Don't tell us though. Don't tell us, because I think the listeners need to tune in to the next episode to hear more about what happened at the roadside services. And I'm sure, Lisa, you've got many a story about the roadside services.
They're just not nice places. They're not my favorite place in the world. Well, one thing, they're overpriced, and you know how I feel about that. But well, I'll tell you more. I'll also tell you more next time. So thank you so much for joining us down the red rabbit hole. Thank you, Lauren, for joining us. It's been
Thank you for having
absolutely
me.
fascinating. Don't go anywhere.
No, we're going to keep
You have to stay for a week. I've got you a pillow and a sleeping bag. We're going up. Our catering's going up. There won't be any breakfast, but still, we're slowly making it better. I've cleared out the worms. It's lovely.
That's more than Bridget Walsh got the other day, wasn't it?
I know. Yeah.
Poor Alice Hawkins.
I know. I'm being really nice, aren't I? Today?
I know. Lauren's getting the special treatment.
I'm very lucky, but I really do need a coffee in the morning, guys.
Look, we'll sort that out. Don't worry.
Is it the kind of fellow mum thing that I'm feeling some fellow mum vibes, and I'm like, I just want to make it a nice, quiet, relaxing stay for you without any children running around. Just
Thank you.
giving you some time to yourself, really. Down the deep, dark, wet, damp rabbit hole. And that was a terrible euphemism there. But still, here we go. If you would like to find out more about whether the red rabbit hole is a euphemism, please follow us on our socials. We are on TikTok, we are on Facebook, and we are on Instagram at the Red Rabbit Hole Podcast. You can find us wherever you listen to your podcast. So please seek us out there. Give us a follow. We also have a Patreon, don't we, Nikki? I nearly forgot about that.
We do, yeah. Follow the Red Rabbit onto Patreon, and you can get this next episode before everybody else and find out what that scary event is that Lauren's going to tell us about, and Lisa's opinions of roadside.
Also worth tuning in for.
I'll be waiting with bated breath, I think, now.
So thank you, listeners, and do subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything to subscribe on the platform you're listening to, so every subscription helps us. We are a new podcast.
And if you like us, write a review. If you don't, just move on. That's fine.
That's what we always used to say.
See you next time. Bye.
Bye.